Hello, hello. Heather Jean here from Confidence Through Cabaret. I'm so excited for this session of Confidence with Coffee. And this is the time when we share a little bit of an excerpt, a little bit of a discussion around our latest podcast. So, for this episode's podcast, I have spent some time with the lovely Leigh W Walker, and we have been talking about NLP, or neuro linguistic programming, and timeline therapy, which is some of the work that Leigh does as a health and wellness coach. So, Leigh particularly works with mothers and helps clear blocks. And if you want to check out the whole episode, please do so. If you're here on the YouTube channel, then like and subscribe and go check out the Vodcast playlist. So that's the video podcast. And if you search there, you'll find Leigh W Walker and I having the podcast episode discussion around neuro-linguistic programming and timeline therapy. If you're a podcast listener and you prefer your audios, then check out Confidence Through Cabaret anywhere where you get your podcasts, and you'll be able to find the episode with Leigh and I. And so Leigh explains her story and how she got into it, and it's what I would now call a very common story for not only but especially women, and for most women actually, which is that bit about shrinking ourselves, which is that bit about feeling like we have to always be giving and taking very little for ourselves, or giving very little back to ourselves. And also, that kind of fear of, what will people think, or that need for people to like us. I have spent almost my entire life in that mode. I know that some of my children have that as well, obviously because I displayed the behavior. So it's really important work that we clear our limiting beliefs. And if you've been around Confidence Through Cabaret for a while, you'll know that we do a huge amount of work around imposter syndrome, and also around accepting your body. And it is very possible to accept your body the way it is and also want to make changes. But in order to let something go, we need to find that root cause. We need to find the positive learnings from it, and we need to release it and replace it with positive beliefs, or in some cases steps or actions that are serving us better. And sometimes for me, that involves working with clients around resetting some boundaries. Sometimes that includes, kind of changing some of the linguistics that we put around around things. For example, I know that I had a habit of talking about what I have to do, and yet I had lots of choices. And once I learned to change the linguistics around it, and change the programming in my brain of how I look at things, I realize it's a choice, and that therefore means I have other choices, and that therefore means that I can, choose whatever option I want to choose. So Leigh talks about going through what neurolinguistic programming means in her context, and also around timeline therapy. So let's have a listen to what timeline therapy is in the work that Leigh Walker does.
And timeline therapy is incredibly powerful process to really get to the root cause of emotions and limiting beliefs. We don't have to sit with therapists for 5 years talking about our problems. We actually can get to the root cause and shift it like that. Like, it is really, really powerful. So we all have our own timeline, and this process actually takes us back to, so we clear the 5 main emotions is one of the processes, which is a really important process to do. So we have anger, sadness, fear, hurt, and guilt. And we go back to the very first event. Our unconscious mind will take us to that very first event where we experience that emotion. And then we get to learn the positive learnings from that event, because what we do, we're very good at stacking our emotions throughout our lifetime.
Yes, beautiful. I love that Leigh is talking about throughout our lifetimes. We have all of these emotions and all of this programming, and it is just stacking on top of each other. And a lot of that comes from adults in our life when we were children who got those limiting beliefs or those patterns from their parents, who got it from their parents, and so on. And I can trace, certainly, I mean, I didn't know anybody beyond my grandparents, but I know certainly my grandparents used a lot of the language patterns that my parents have. Certainly explainable, them, trying to exist in the Depression and through world wars, and then passing that scarcity on to my parents, who passed it on to me. And so, really, kind of finding that root cause of those beliefs is important. As I said before, then finding the positives of it. If you want to replace something, you have to be able to, or if you want to release something, you have to be able to replace it with something. So, finding those positives, what did it serve us? Because it did serve us at some time. And then being able to step into the new beliefs that serve us how we are, that are actually our own story and not everyone else's story. So I love that Leigh's talking about the stacking. What I think is especially helpful about timeline therapy is how quick it is. So I'm a neurolinguistic MetaMaster practitioner, and I trained under Richard Bandler, who is, very well known. One of the two kind of, I won't say founders, but certainly grandfathers of neurolinguistic programming, and the first really to kind of bring this. So neuro, the pathways, right? It's our brain, and then linguistic is the language, and that's a changeable language, and then programming, which means that if we were programmed, we can reprogram. Right, that's the kind of the basics of how it was explained to me by Richard Bandler. But I think, what I love about the extension into the timeline therapy work is not only how quick it is, but also that we can get into some of the unconscious things. So, Leigh and I talk about this on the podcast episode where, we might remember something, when we were 4 years old or 7 years old or whatever it is, of an instance, but in our unconscious, we have stored other things that we're not aware of, but everything is stored in there. And so with timeline therapy, it allows us to be able to go into that trance state and be able to find or access the unconscious and release it at a much deeper level than our conscious brain is capable of doing. So it's a beautiful piece of work. Leigh and I also talk about, kind of going through the first time that we recognize that we made a decision about I'm not enough, or I need permission, or I need to always be giving, or whatever that belief is, and then playing that out fully, and then really kind of connecting to it and finding the positive learnings from it. So we also talked quite a bit, and at one stage Leigh went off because Wi-Fi, and I'm in the UK and she's in Australia, so it's a whole thing. We talked a lot about that expression of fear versus excitement in our bodies, and I know that if you've been around Confidence Through Cabaret, that is an ongoing theme with us, where when I'm about to perform or when I'm about to do something, really tapping into it as excitement instead of fear, because our brain and our body do not know the difference. Right. So if you create something and you tell yourself this is fear, this is fear, this is fear, guess what? Your body's going to experience fear. And then your body's going to reinforce to your brain, it's fear, it is fear. And it's a vicious, kind of cycle. However, if we're telling ourselves this is excitement, it's the same sensation, but how we filter it and how we represent it is yes, it's exciting, isn't it? Yes, it's exciting. And it goes in that kind of circle. And I always like to use the example of being on a roller coaster, when we're at the very top and we're about to go down the hill and around the loop or whatever it is, there's a simultaneous experience of terrified and exhilarated in the same moment, and it's a choice right then what we're paying attention to. So for example, I'm terrified in those moments, but I acknowledge it as exhilaration, and I scream like crazy when I'm on a roller coaster, because it lets out that energy and allows me to laugh and find it, and by the time I've let out the scream, we're down. So it's how we choose to experience it. However, if I focused on it, one of my children doesn't like roller coasters, and if they're on a roller coaster, they'll choose to experience this is uncomfortable and I hate it. then that's the experience, and that's how we'll store that information. Exactly the same situation, but it's how we're storing that. And then back to that clip that we just heard around, we're stacking and layering all of these experiences throughout our lifetimes, and a lot of it we don't remember in our conscious brains. We talked a lot about shrinking, as I've mentioned, and we also talked about how this helps us grow our results. And a lot of times people will talk to me about how does body confidence, or how does overcoming our imposter voice, how does that help us get business results? Well, it does, because if you have this belief that you're not suitable for camera, or you're not comfortable, and you'll shrink, you won't make the right eye contact, you won't connect with your audience, you won't project that confidence, and you won't be projecting what people need to build trust with you. So for trust, it's like a three-legged stool, right? So I don't know how to show you this on the cameras. It's like I always have these ideas, and then they seem good in my head. So there's a three-legged stool, right? And if you pull out one of the legs, the whole thing's going to fall over. That's all I was trying to do with that. That was a lot of effort for that. But it's that. So it's that we need to. It needs to make logical sense. There needs to be a sense of empathy in order for us to that the other person is understanding us and really seeing us. And then we need to have that sense of that this is going to add value. And if there's a disconnect because I'm not comfortable in my own body, or I'm not comfortable in what's happening in my internal dialogue, then it is very difficult, if not impossible, for me to connect with you. And if I don't know you well, I'm not going to trust you. I'm not going to buy from you, no matter how good your program sounds on paper, if I'm not connecting with you. And so it's that, really being able to release how we're feeling about it, accept how we're feeling about it, learn to at least accept, if not ideally love, how we feel in our bodies, and then show up with that confidence. And you'll know that we talk about it's your body, your world, your stage, and we talk about taking up space. And if you've heard my story before, I did not like to take up space. I was happy to speak in front of very large audiences, no problem. But I didn't like it if people were paying attention to me, right? So as long as I could go, oh, but look at the material, look at the slide, look at the exercise, look at the group of people you're sitting with. As long as I could keep kind of going on about my material, then I could convince myself that I wasn't on show. But of course, once I was on show as me, that was brutal. And I had to learn to shift that. And I had to learn to be okay with people not being okay with me. And we talk about that actually in the podcast episode as well, about, keep scrolling. If you don't like what I'm saying, or you don't like this post, or you don't like my style, or it's not for you, keep scrolling. That's fine. And I have that same attitude in a live cabaret setting. It's like, if you don't like this, you did not need to buy a ticket, and you do not need to stay. And I love that freedom of that, but it takes work to get to that stage. So if this is something that speaks to you, or something that the kind of work that you want to do, join us in the Confidence Through Cabaret community. Send me a direct message. Facebook is mostly where I hang out. You'll also find me on LinkedIn as Heather Jean, on both of those. So you can send me a direct message, or get in touch with me through Confidence Through Cabaret. We are Confidence Through Cabaret on all of the socials. I am Heather Jean, and I'm so glad to have you here with us as part of the community. It's such a privilege to spend a few minutes each week with you, just kind of sharing my kind of takeaways and my own journey, and my own input around what our beautiful podcast guests share with us. So thank you to all of our podcast guests, especially this week to Leigh W Walker. And I am Heather Jean. We are Confidence Through Cabaret on all of the socials except for Twitter, which is at YBYWYS. And on Clubhouse, it's at Heather YBYWYS. And those 6 beautiful letters stand for, it is your body, You get to choose. You get to set boundaries. It is your world, and you get to explore and dream big and follow that. And it is your stage. So you get to own your space and enjoy unapologetically unshakable confidence. Thank you so much. Your body, your world, your stage. Until next time, see you again. Bye.